Dave Filoni is making waves by discussing what he means when everybody can use the Force and be a Jedi, and everyone cannot use the Force and be a Jedi. I am joined by special guest Tim from Open Airlock Policy to discuss Dave Filoni's latest comments and whether or not he's actually on the right path or he's just completely pulling it out of his butt and redoing what George Lucas had previously created with Star Wars. So I'm glad to have Tim here from Open Airlock. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on, and let's see if we can come up with some hot takes for the bot fakes here, John.
Indeed, indeed. So, Dave Filoni, this is over at thatparkplace.com, wrote this earlier, I guess on Saturday, but he did an appearance, I guess it was actually a week ago, for the Dagobah Dispatch, which is Entertainment Weekly's Star Wars centered podcast. And he has some interesting comments. Here's the headline: Ahsoka creator Dave Filoni explains how, quote, everyone can become a Jedi and everyone cannot become a Jedi. So let's kind of get into exactly what he said here. First, he was asked to provide some more details as to why he chose to have Sabine be trained as a Jedi under Ahsoka Tano. The host of the podcast said, "Tell me a little bit about why you wanted to pair kind of Ahsoka and Sabine." I think some people were a little surprised that Sabine would want to follow her on this path of the Jedi. I think that's a little bit of an understatement there.
Yeah.
Surprise, I think. But
Yes.
this is what Filoni said. It was something I really got interested in when we made Star Wars Rebels. Tia Sakar did an incredible job with the character of Sabine and bringing her to life. And though working with her and understanding the voice of the character, I understood the character better. And she became so much more by the end of that series than just a warrior. She had a real struggle. She was a fighter. She was kind of brash. She reminded me a lot of Anakin in a lot of ways. He then elaborated, saying, and I thought this is a really good pairing because for Ahsoka, I could see a tendency to want to teach somebody that reminds her of her mentor, but I could also see the danger that would be present in that. So the familiarity can go two ways. And I just really like Sabine and her reckless nature. Again, it really reminded me of Anakin and Ahsoka's pairing. And there's a lot to kind of unwind there in her own history. It had to be complicated, and it was even better if they just weren't getting along together in the beginning. This is the stuff that I kind of hate. This is the Brian Johnson uh, Star Wars idea where you have to like basically take Luke Skywalker, make him struggling, suck. He hasn't done all of these other things before, so you got to bring him down to some level so then you can like rebuild his path. And Filoni seems to be doing the same thing here, or at least that's what he's saying his
Absolutely.
intentions are. So I just hate this. Like even we're not even talking about the Force yet or the Jedi yet. Just this his whole intention of why he
Well,
put these
and
two
I want to say
together.
something about this character and the portrayal in live action. I don't obviously like Rebels, not being a Disney Star Wars fan, but I had been calling this out a couple of years when they started talking about casting for live action, even rumored. Why not have the lady of South Asian descent, i.e., Indian descent, play that character? Like, why not? She did the voice. She didn't not look like the character, the animated wise. She's good in interviews. She's good with the audience and stuff. Why not have her? So you could say this is a case of Disney, Star Wars, Disney Lucasfilm, like whitewashing a character because she was of Indian descent. So I found that interesting that they chose to use a completely different actress for the role.
Yeah, they used you can see here Natasha Liu Bordizzo, and then obviously Rosario Dawson played Ahsoka instead
Yep.
of Ashley Eckstein. I think they did that for pretty much everyone across the board for the most part. None of the
And I can
actual
understand the main
voice
role, right,
actors.
with
Yeah.
Ashley, but this other role, it's like they easily could have used the other actress, without any problems, in my opinion. But whatever, when they want to do what they want to do, they do it. But if another company were to, like cast a white person instead of, if the source material is a minority, then they get called out for it. But not Disney; they get a pass for some reason here. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and then the one actor that they did cast was Thrawn. They had the voice actor from Thrawn playing the actual character, and I think he did a subpar job personally. Just even if
Absolutely,
you
you
take
did.
it outside of everything else.
Absolutely.
All right, but let's get into this force sensitivity and the force at large. This is kind of where he transitioned to that. Filoni said the idea that she's not incredibly adept at wielding the force, I think, is a strong thing. It's amazing how fans and the Star Wars franchise has evolved. There are all these thoughts and opinions and groups. You can find different camps on how they think everything works. Well, that seems like an absolutely bizarre comment to make. You would think that franchise such as Star Wars would have defined rules, and you wouldn't have all these thoughts and opinions in groups because people would understand how the Force works. He's seemingly saying that like depending on what day it is, and what group he decides to align himself with is how the rules of Star Wars works.
Yeah, and it
Utterly
was
ridiculous.
it was never George's intention or his top brass's intention for everything to evolve. That's why in the early 90s, I'm going to say 93, 94, they formed, I guess, what you could call the proto story group, which the new story group for Disney Star Wars does nothing, right? They do nothing because all the continuity errors and stuff that we've seen, they get paid to basically justify everything as we see Pablo Hidalgo do. But in the early 90s, you had the Lucasfilm licensing spinoff, right? It was its own entity and they managed all of this stuff. There are interviews in Star Wars Galaxy Magazine Insider that said, hey, there is one continuity. Now, that's not to say that George wouldn't override stuff because there were levels, right? But there was one continuity. When you look at Star Trek, all those novels from the 70s, 80s, there was no intention or effort to make them in continuity with each other or with even the films and television shows because they were just fun adventures. But with Star Wars, in the early 90s, after Timothy Zahn's novels, they decided, let's have one continuity. There was no evolution, as Filoni says here. That's another way for him to excuse the directions that they're going right now with the franchise and the property and the
Yeah,
characters and the universe.
100% agree with you there. I don't really have anything to add. So we'll just move on with what Filoni says here. He says, but very fundamentally, if you just pay attention to the films George made, you understand that the Force is an energy field created by all living things. So the Force emanates from all of us and everything, right? All living things. It surrounds us, it penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together. So she's not absent from the Force; she is part of the Force. I don't think there's anything objectionable there.
No,
It
that's
seems
correct.
very accurate, right?
Yeah.
He goes on and says, part of the problem is it's like anything in life that you want to do, you have to train hard to acquire the skills. Everyone can become a Jedi and everybody cannot become a Jedi because we know there are things in our life, take martial arts skills or even something like yoga, and say that if I did that, that's better for me, that's healthier, that's empowering. So why don't we all do it? It takes time, it takes commitment, and even people that do it don't all turn out to be great at it. So in Star Wars, I'm sure people are aware, obviously, that there are Jedi Knights. He's talking like, so he's not talking about us as the fans. He's talking about people that like live within the characters that live within Star Wars.
Yes. Yes.
Fewer people are even aware that the Force exists. They don't understand how the Jedi do what they do. But like Qui-Gon says, to train to become a Jedi, it's a hard life. It's difficult to do. Many people would never even come close to achieving their goal of manipulating an object without the Force, let alone pushing or pulling somebody else, because that person's will is set against you, and that makes it even harder. So, uh, do you find anything objectionable here? Or is there anything that you disagree with?
No, I don't disagree with any of that. You heard what Qui-Gon said in The Phantom Menace, one of the greatest Star Wars films. It's underrated. I like it a lot. But the point here is that he says people, but he means really qualified people. Because if not, why wouldn't people just be signing up at the temple, right? You kind of would have like a recruitment day, like The Voice or American Idol or something. You just get in line, and
Right.
then nope, you can't do it. You can no, you have to be qualified to do it. If you look at the lore, if you look at leading up to Attack of the Clones and stuff, they had those news reports and all that about what's going on in the galaxy. And there was a baby that they had identified as a potential Force user, and is the Jedi going to take him away or not? All that type of stuff. Yeah, you have to get past that qualification. So he's not talking about people in general. When Qui-Gon was talking about, the life of a Jedi, he meant people that are qualified and are approved to undergo the training. Even they don't pass. That's why the Jedi had the Agra Corps. So I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but if you start training and you become attuned to the Force and you can use it, yet maybe your character isn't up to par, maybe you just can't hack it, then you become a part of the Agra Corps and you do agricultural work because they let you loose, right? Then you'll wind up with a Force user out in the galaxy that's partially trained and could be potentially dangerous. So he means people that have been qualified, they go through the training and then they fail. He doesn't mean just people in general because it doesn't make any sense. And we'll get more into that in the article, obviously.
Yeah, and we saw Qui-Gon kind of explaining how their process worked too, and and you had like the back and forth with Obi-Wan, and then obviously with the Council about him being too old, and they had to pass all the tests. So it was very clear that they had things that you had to be qualified to in order to be accepted into the
Correct.
Jedi Temple. And you might be a little bit more expert on this. I assume Luke probably instituted some of that stuff as well when he started building the new Jedi Order that they have taken away from him and seemingly are going to hand to Rey in future
Yeah,
movies.
and that's
But
that's a whole other video there,
right,
John. Like we could go into like why did he allow his Jedi to marry and stuff like that. Well, basically in one sentence, it's the fact that the old Jedi Order it failed, right? And there are lines from Yoda himself, like in Revenge of the Sith, that allude to that. But that's an entirely different topic to discuss
right.
sometime in the future.
But even then, though, Luke still had those kind of qualifiers for people that were
Sure,
to have
yes.
to train as a Jedi, right?
Yep.
So it's right, exactly. All right,
And
let's
and by
continue.
the way, he's Luke
Oh,
Skywalker, right? He's
yes,
the exception to the rule. He probably has almost as many midi-chlorians as his father had, as other powerful Force users. As he defeated Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine, right? He stood them down. So he is the exception to the rule. He's not the chosen one, but he's the son of the chosen one, and he's extremely powerful. So people need to forget that. Oh, if Luke could do it, this other Joe Blow could do it. No, you couldn't because he's Luke Skywalker. So people need to remember that.
exactly. So Filoni goes on and says, "So I wanted to tell the story though of she's a very very talented warrior. She's a very talented person, but this is not something that's easy for her, and I think that makes it relatable to people. Where generally we've always seen very gifted people be trained, and I wanted to show kind of the opposite." With the warning that if she achieves her potential, there's also the danger in that because of the way she is as a warrior. She's prone to anger. All the things that makes Ahsoka concerned could flare up. I don't know. It was kind of fun. It was fun hearing the debate that people were having about it. We'll see what happened. So that is what he said. And I mean, it sounds like we kind of agree with everything that he says there. People can indeed have like low potential almost and still be kind of trained as a Jedi if they meet a lot of these qualifiers that they have to pass. But what he actually provided us is to me is a contradiction to what he actually says. How he actually shows what happens with Sabine in the show is not what he's saying here. I mean, she has a massive power boost in the last episode of the show where beforehand they showed her she couldn't move a cup at all. She really was really struggling with using the force uh, at all. They don't show her doing any kind of training sequences with the force. There's one time where they're like kind of winking at you that she's doing a training sequence, but then it's actually a ship coming in and shaking the wall. So she wasn't really actually training, and it was maybe for
Nice.
I don't know 30 seconds, if that. And then all of a sudden, though, she's now being able to pull a lightsaber towards her. She's able to massively force push someone up through the sky. Like, I don't know, what is that? I don't know, probably like 200 feet, 300 feet, whatever it was.
Right.
Massive jump. So she just has this massive power boost all of a sudden. And it's like, well, no, you have the robot tells her that she's the most least potential person ever and wouldn't actually have been accepted back when like Yoda was running the Jedi Temple beforehand.
Yep. Yep.
So um so what do you make of what Filoni's saying here and like how his actual actions? Because again, I think it sounds like we kind of agree with what he's actually saying um when he's describing people's potential and how like the force works, but when he actually puts it into action and executes on it, it's the opposite of what he's saying.
Well, I don't agree that every person in the Star Wars galaxy, whether they're human or not, could potentially use telekinesis, like even to move something an inch. I don't think all of them could. That's his misconception. But for them to be attuned to it, then yeah, that's possible. If you look at the new Jedi Order in the original lineup from Kevin J. Anderson, there's a character Tion, and she barely has any ability. I can't remember how Luke found her because there's a unique story for each of the first 7, 8 that he found. But she winds up being the lore master and a teacher and all that stuff. But she can do stuff eventually, but not to the point where she's doing stuff to your point, where they're pulling stuff down 200 feet in the air and all that type of crap. Never able to do that. So yeah, I believe that people with light force attunement can use it, but not everyone can. I just Lucas has never established that, and I'm sure you're gonna get into that part, and I can elaborate on that for sure once we get there.
Yeah, so let's get right to it. During the Revenge of the Jedi story conference in 1981, so this was before they had actually retitled the film to
Mm-hmm.
Return of the Jedi. They were originally calling it Revenge of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually speaking with Lawrence Kasdan and Ross Markin, and Kasdan asked him, the Force was available to anyone who could hook into it. And Lucas responded saying, yes, everybody can do it. And then Kasdan asked, not just the Jedi. And Lucas said, it's just the Jedi who take the time to do it. And then Markin said, they use it as a technique. And then Lucas explained, like yoga, if you want to take the time to do it, you can do it. But the ones that really want to do it are the ones who are into that kind of thing. Also, like karate. And then he went on to say, like, also another misconception is that Yoda teaches Jedi, but he is like a guru who doesn't go out and fight anybody. Obviously, he did indeed have him go and fight Count Dooku and
Yeah.
Sidious in the prequels. So he does say that like almost anybody can do it, but it does take time. So, and that's kind of where I come at from this angle is like I like, and I
Yeah.
think what you're saying. Hold on,
Well,
listen. Yeah,
go ahead.
well, yeah. So where I come at from this is, I think anyone can become a Jedi, but like you were saying earlier, not everyone is going to be able to have those like same skills. Not everyone's going to be able to use telekinesis, and sometimes it might take a really long time to get there. And then also, as we talked about already, is that the Jedi weren't actually looking at everybody to become a Jedi. They obviously had those qualifiers, but that doesn't mean that obviously someone else maybe wants to restart the Jedi, or you might have I don't know, someone like Qui-Gon who wants to maybe take someone on. He's kind of that he ruffles the feathers a little bit, does a little bit of his own rules, kind of. He could maybe take on someone like that. So what do you make of that idea? And then obviously though, they wouldn't be like super talented. They might just be a skilled swordsman or something like that. And it would take years and years and years and years of training in order to kind of attain that. So you might have someone who's still at like maybe like youngling status as an adult. I mean, if we're comparing it to something like karate or even taekwondo, you can start that and get a white belt or whatever. But if you don't like move up, you're still there as a white belt, even if you're not progress. You wouldn't progress all the time. So
Well, of all the arguments that have been going on about this for the last 2 or 3 days, the magic bullet for this conversation right here with Kasdan and Lucas and whoever else was involved in that is the book that this was transcribed in has a disclaimer, right? I don't know if you have that particular screenshot, but the
I
book that
don't.
transcribed all this has the disclaimer right above all these comments that are in script style, right? With the Lucas and a colon and all that. And it says, this is all like discussion around filmmaking, whatever it said exactly. And it should not be considered canon, literally that. So for people to take these quotes and say, "Hey, look, he said this because George changed his mind all the time, right, about his
we,
own stuff."
we see we see
So
that in this quote with Yoda right here as well.
exactly, exactly. So that disclaimer is on there, but let's just take this for what it is. When he says, "Yes, everybody can do it, not just the Jedi," it's just the Jedi that take the time to do it. So think about this. Even then, he's not saying everybody. Let's say that you have some potential force ability, right? You couldn't just start training on your own. I think he uses karate as the example because you have to show up to the dojo, right? And then if they
Right.
take you on, then you can learn your potential and learn how to do it. So that's what happens with the Jedi. So when he says everybody can do it, I think what he means is if you already have the ability to do it, you can do it. It doesn't just say like everybody can just, start doing it. So the point is, if you show up to a dojo in our earth right now, right? And let's say you weigh 400 pounds and you're 60 years old, you're probably not going to be able to do it. So the same thing applies here, where not just the Jedi, it's just the Jedi who take the time to do it. So there could be other force, I don't want to say religions, but ways to study it and to access it and all that out there in the galaxy. We know there are from expanded universe, but the point
From the
is
Sith.
you have to have somebody to teach you do it. And if you're just a Joe Blow, it probably means you can't learn it because you didn't have that connection to begin with. And we'll get into some of the other screenshots you have that shows that he eventually changed his mind down the road.
Yeah, so we have this from OG Star Wars. It was an interview with Paul Duncan and was published in the Star Wars archives. Lucas said, that's why I split it into the personal force and the cosmic force. The personal
Yep.
force is the energy field created by ourselves interacting and doing things while we are alive. When we die, we lose our persona and our energy is assimilated into the cosmic force. And then he said, if we have enough midichlorians in our body, we can have a certain amount of control over our personal force and learn how to use it, like the Buddhist practice of being able to walk on hot coals. Some people can't because they just don't have as many midichlorians. That's just genetics. So the more midichlorians we have, the more accessibility we have to the force. So we have to be trained how to use it.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think this kind of gets into that point that we're talking about here. Like, obviously, genetics do play a factor. Not everyone is going to be Evander Holyfield. Not everyone's going to be Mike Tyson. They are obviously the top of their talent when it comes to boxing in their different divisions in their different eras of boxing. And I think the same is said here of the Jedi, right? And that kind of gets kind of where I think I can still make the same argument that I was making before. Like, obviously, you can have someone who is still being trained as a Jedi. They might not have all of these other talents than all of these other Jedi might have because they just don't have the midichlorian count to do that. And I think you made an example there too, that there were places where they could go. You were the Agricor, you could be the lore master. You find different roles for them when they might not be as talented in some other place. I mean, you see that today. There's different vocations for Catholic priests. There's different like religious orders. There's diocesan priests and things like that, and they find different places to do that. And they all have their own individual talents as well. So that's kind of the comparison I would make there for in comparing it to kind of our real life here. But what would you say to this?
I think it would be a waste of time, and I don't think the Jedi Order would do it because the Jedi aren't. Oh, it's a bunch of nice good guys. They were kind of jerks, in a lot of ways, and Yoda alludes to that in Revenge of the Sith, as I said. But I don't think they would take someone on if they know they will never reach that point. Yeah, you can have them go through the training and the exercises, and maybe they're physically fit, but it's a waste of time if they're not going to reach that level that they want to because they don't have the midi-chlorian count, right? Um,
Yes, I
so and
100%
then
agree with you.
yeah, and then the Agricore thing, they could be potentially extremely powerful, but maybe they just don't have they're not the right fit with their personality or um, something like that. They could quite frankly, some of them wind up probably in prison and stuff like that. But if even if they can do the powers, maybe they're not the right fit to go out there and be a guardian of peace and justice in the
Yeah,
galaxy, right?
it
So
redirects their purpose and gives them work, so they're
yeah,
not out
so
there running amok.
yeah, so again, if we have enough midi chlorians in our body, we can have a certain amount of control. So if you don't have enough, then you don't have that control. So you're going to have some, but I think if you wanted to look at the Ahsoka show and say, "Hey, Sabine can do it," then if I'm on that side of the argument, I'd say, well, she did have enough and she just didn't know it. It's just a big coincidence, right? That she and Ezra and all these other characters that are around each other happen to have enough to do it. I don't think this
Well,
is evidence that anyone off the street that can do it if they train hard enough.
yeah, and I'll actually in the Ahsoka show, you have the robot who is this like leftover droid, I guess, from the old Jedi Order. He actually
Hmm.
comments that she doesn't have the potential, indicating that she doesn't have the midichlorians.
Well, there you go.
So the fact that she has this massive power boost is just utterly ridiculous. And again, it goes to the fact that Dave Filoni really doesn't know what he's like. It's seemingly I mean, I think he kind of does kind of understand what he's talking about, but then when he actually puts it into practice, he shows that he doesn't. Because again, I think when we looked at what he was saying here, it all seemed to kind of align with these quotes we're seeing from George and how people use the force. They need these midi chlorian counts. They need this stuff. Like he even has the robot make that comment in the show saying she doesn't have that potential. And then all of a sudden, when the plot needs it, she has like massive potential, and she's now uh, throwing people like 500 feet into the air and just has all kinds of force abilities
Well,
that
and that droid's
which should take years
comments,
to train.
that droid's comments then cements kind of my conclusion here. Is there anything else? Should I kind of give you my conclusion at this point?
Yes, let's hear it.
So then I was unaware of those lines from the droid. If I knew, if I read it somewhere, I've forgotten. But the point is, he set up those lines to, counter the argument that I just made now, because he wants this to be anyone can do it, right? Going back to Rey, she was a nobody. Remember in Last Jedi, before they changed all that stuff
Yeah.
with JJ coming back to Rise of Skywalker, they want this notion that anybody off the street can be a hero, anyone can be powerful in the Force, because you know what I call it? I call it Force redistribution. That's what it is, basically. Everyone can be a hero, this postmodernist garbage that anyone off the street, yeah, you can be a hero, great, but it doesn't mean you're going to be all powerful. You're not going to be Luke Skywalker level of Force ability, that type of stuff. And they could have done that with this character without having to make her, like within a couple of days, months, whatever it was, pull something down from 200 feet in the air, something like that. So that's what it is. They want this agenda of anybody, even, females, young females, whatever, they can be as powerful as the heroes that we've known. That's all this is. It's messaging. It's just as political as The Last Jedi is. And Dave Filoni is not your savior, guys. His promotion means that things are not getting better. They're probably getting worse. At the very least, it's status quo for Disney Star Wars from here on out.
Yeah, I'm definitely pessimistic on Filoni's promotion. I don't think that Star Wars is going to get any better, and it's just going to go downhill again. I think he's saying some of the things that are accurate, but then when he actually puts it to practice, as we see in the Ahsoka show, he doesn't actually back up what he's actually saying. He's showing the opposite, and the guy's just kind of a walking contradiction, very hypocritical, and it shows to me you can't really trust anyone like that. And he's definitely not the person to lead Star Wars into the future. And to me, I don't think he actually understands Star Wars in general. When
he doesn't want to, John. That's the thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. He wants to create
and
his
always
own vision.
Yep.
Yeah, go
and
ahead.
always plant some truth within a lie, right? And that's what he does all the time, because it's easier to swallow for people that won't do the research or listen to what the actual truth is. So he's brilliant in that regard. He knows how to portray himself as this nice guy, as this George Lucas heir apparent that wants what's best for Star Wars. And he's succeeded at that, because look how many people support him, regardless of which side they're on.
Well, I'd like to thank you for being here. I think that people should definitely follow you to see the truth about Star Wars. You are one of the preeminent experts on Star Wars. You do the research and you find it out, and you let people know what it actually is, rather than leading them astray like Dave Filoni does constantly. So thank you for joining us, and
thank you.
We hope to have you back soon on the Trent Report.
Anytime. Thanks, John.